Good morning. This is News Guardian Greg here this morning with my co-host Chip. Joining us this morning is Sam Rasoul, Democrat candidate in the 11th House of Delegates district in this coming Tuesday's special election. He's running against former Roanoke City Sheriff Octavia Johnson. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
I guess right off the bat, in about 30 seconds, tell our listeners why you should be the next delegate in the 11th district.
You know, I have a strong passion for public policy, and like I tell so many, we may not always agree on the issues, but I want to go to Richmond to work hard for people, and you'll always have my ear.
Very good.
Okay.
Chip?
One of the things we wanted to do was to kind of go through, and to your credit, you've listed a lot of policy positions in your literature and on your website. And one of the issues that struck me was you were calling for a restoration of voting rights and other rights for felons. And that's something that we, in principle, actually kind of agree with you on. But I noticed on the site, is that something for both nonviolent and violent felons, or are you suggesting that we restore rights to all felons at some point?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I think really the emphasis is on nonviolent felons. Some people that have paid their debt to society that obviously do not represent a present danger. We want to do our best to try to reintegrate them. The big thing is recidivism. Recidivism costs us a lot of tax dollars, and so what we can do to reintegrate people back into society, I think, is a productive thing for everyone.
So you are saying that if you do put legislation or you support legislation in Richmond, if you're elected, you would clarify that it's for non-violent felons, correct?
That's right.
Okay, that's good. Greg, do you have something?
Now, recently, I noticed education is one of the important things on your website. One of the emerging ideas that's been talked about in Virginia is parental choice in education. How do you feel about giving parents back, especially the poorest families, the ability to choose where and how their children will be educated in Virginia?
I think that really undermines the public education process. I believe that when we start shifting students around and shifting tax dollars around even, what happens is you leave some schools in some areas without. So I think that it's important to invest in our school system as equitably as possible. And what that also means is maintaining a stable tax base. So that means that we need to ensure that we maintain the integrity of our school districts. So, I would not be in favor. Certainly, I like to give as much autonomy to the localities as possible, the school boards themselves. But I'm not in favor of wholesale decisions of being able to shift where your child is educated.
How would you answer parents who find themselves in a district, like in Norfolk, for example, which made the news over the summer, where they've not only failed to meet accreditation over and over and over, but the families there don't have the resources. They're too poor to do any other thing for their children. They're stuck in that school. Now the school is getting an enormous amount of funding. I believe it's somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 per student that's being paid there. So it's not that that I think that school's underfunded, but from the parents' perspective, they're left without hope. What would you say to that person to make them feel better, or to give them an option that their children could have a good education?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Unfortunately, I don't know all the details around Norfolk and the way that their education system is running. But what I can tell you is that it's not just about funding. Certainly, we need to make sure that the proper funding is there, and hopefully they are receiving the funds that they need. But we are a Commonwealth for a reason. We do need to ensure that proper resources are being allocated there, and the voters there need to make decisions about who's calling the shots in Norfolk. So it's rather unfortunate. I feel as though our schools here in Roanoke City have improved. I'm very pleased with Dr. Bishop and how she has run things, and I hope that we can continue to improve our graduation rates here.
But you don't have to go to Norfolk for those kind of issues. There are still 8 Roanoke City schools that are on warning for not meeting the standards. So what specifically can you do as a state legislator to support that or make that better?
Yeah, when we talk about these standards, that's confusing in and of itself. I mean, I really think that we're trying to head to a system where we're trying to grade schools, and while I've seen states where they have D schools and F schools, and I just really don't agree with that whole system. I think that even F schools in Florida have A students, so I think that it's important for us to really focus on each school. The demographics of each school are different. There are different challenges, and so let's try to really appreciate each locality's challenges and ensure that we continue to improve upon some of the growth that we've seen here in Roanoke City.
Well, I guess from a freedom of choice standpoint, I know that for many people, the ability to have the freedom to choose and to have control of your own life and your children and your family, why is allowing parents the option to choose education for their children not a good idea? Why wouldn't you support that?
Well, I think there's always a balance here between what we take great pride in, our individualism, and then the collective whole. So freedom to choose, that doesn't mean we get to choose everything in our lives. I think that we need to make sure that we clearly understand that we are part of a society that has school districts, and if we underfund one school district, unfortunately there are negative repercussions. Those children that are going to that underfunded school are going to become our neighbors one day. They're going to be friends of our children. So we just need to make sure that resources are distributed as justly as possible.
Well, is the goal there, I guess, equity of funding in schools, or the actual education that the children are getting? I mean, because they would be able to choose to go to a different school if the funding inequity that you talk about ended up being a case. It's not like they're trapped there.
Right. Just to clarify, I mean, the slippery slope here, I'll use Louisiana as an example. I mean, they've got a voucher system where people can take their students right out of the schools. Unfortunately, what we see is a huge disparity in what is happening in the schools there, and it's rather unfortunate that there are so many schools that are severely underfunded. It's a slippery slope. So my point is that members of our community are members of our community. They're going to be your neighbors. They're your friends. They're people that work with you and with your family members. We just need to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity at a fair education.
Okay, let's move on to one of the issues you talk about is what you see as a differentiation between lower pay for women for the same amount of work. And, generally speaking, when legislation is put forward, it's to address a specific issue. So I hear about this pay equity issue, but I wanted to know if you have any specific examples of companies or individuals in this area that are suffering because of pay discrimination.
Yeah, I don't myself. What I do know is that nationally, I think it's around 78 cents on the dollar. We just need to make sure that from when we do put workplace discrimination laws in place, that it does address this issue. But more importantly, that's the legislative side. On the executive side, we've got to make sure that there are teeth to go in and enforce that. All we want is to just end discrimination on so many levels, and obviously that is still one that is very evident in society, that women are not paid the same as men, and here in Virginia we should be doing our part to ensure that doesn't
What if
happen.
the 77 or 78%, because you're correct, that is the correct statistic, I believe it's 77%. What if it was shown that choices people make cause the pay equity distribution? For example, my wife decided not to work for 8 years and stay home and then went back into the workforce. So that would obviously have a negative impact on her earning potential. Some women choose to work part-time. If that was the cause of the 77% statistic, and not discrimination. Or so you're saying that 23% differentiation is all caused by discrimination. If that was true, it would seem to me there would be a lot of wholesale cases of discrimination against women who aren't getting paid equitably to men. So I would think if that was true, there would be specific cases. How would you answer that question?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think that what's important to understand is, first and foremost, all salaries are not publicly disclosed, so we don't have a great way here, even locally, to be able to gauge that, which is important. Secondly, we should look at the methodology of these studies, because I think that I believe that they're trying to compare apples to apples, and not so much just a woman with X number of years in this position versus a man with X number of years in that position. So hopefully they're comparing apples to apples and showing that it's just a true pay inequity, because we know that it does exist. We've heard many stories, but it's not necessarily public information. Many times this is pulled from private surveys that are done. So it does exist, and we just want to make sure that when a woman feels as though she's not been treated correctly and has been discriminated against for whatever reason, that she has the right to take necessary legal action.
Isn't that already exist, though?
It does to a certain extent, but you've got to have, for example, we have laws on the books, but we don't necessarily have the proper enforcement mechanisms. Do you have the teeth to come in and actually enforce it properly? Many times that isn't the case, and oftentimes that varies state by state.
Well, enforcement, or I guess wholesale enforcement, in the way you described, is more a matter of having the government bring the police in, and force action, as opposed to specific cases where women feel like they're being discriminated against and they take legal action by going to court. So are you saying that the legislation that would take care of this situation is one where we would have police enforcement, the government using police enforcement to go into the hiring, the pay, and start policing every single female and male employee in the state to make sure there's equity?
Yeah, it's not about police enforcement. There's an executive branch where you have agencies that are responsible for ensuring that human resource practices are properly being administered and being followed. Certainly with our three branches of government, I'm advocating, of course, being part of the legislative process, but we would ensure that hopefully that there in the executive branch that there is the proper enforcement mechanism. And
what would that enforcement mechanism actually look like? Kind of describe for us how that would work.
Yeah, so you can have it. What happens is that even Department of Labor at a federal level goes in and audits human resource records, and so just making sure that at a variety of levels that that women have the ability to be able to take action and be respected when that becomes an issue.
Well, it's just the reason I bring this up is I've worked for two of the largest employers in the Roanoke Valley, and I can, as a manager, and I'm not only have I not seen this, but I know as a manager we actively worked to ensure that this didn't happen. So it's been my experience that at least with larger companies, not only is this not an issue, I mean, it is actively worked on. It is an active issue that companies work to prevent it from happening because they don't want to have an EEO claim.
Yeah.
So that's why I was curious when I hear this issue come up, because, again, if it was such a huge issue, I would think there would be lawsuits being filed by people who are being discriminated against, or people saying, look, I don't have the recourse to do something. So it seems to me most of the time when you put legislation in to fix a problem, there's a defined people that are being hurt. And just saying, well, I know people are being hurt by it, but I can't tell you who it is, it's hard for me to understand why that rises to the level of needing legislation?
Well, there may be a difference of opinion here, but because I clearly see that those surveys are showing that there is a disparity between what women are paid and what men are paid for the same positions, and so I think that to say that that disparity doesn't exist, we may just have to agree to disagree on that.
I'm not sure that I'm not sure it does or doesn't exist.
It does exist. It's why
I'm just thinking that shouldn't you find where it exists before changing the laws of Virginia
and why it
to
exists.
accommodate it?
But that's what let's move on. Let's move on to another topic because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we get a couple more things in. You wanted to.
What's hit the news again today is the story of the Little Sisters of the Poor Catholic nuns who have a lawsuit in the Supreme Court alleging that the requirement for certain items under the new health care that they're supposed to have in the Affordable Patient Act, Obamacare, are unconstitutional because of their freedom of religion. How do you come down on constitutional rights versus state mandates in that particular situation? Because there's been a lot of these with Obamacare. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the details of that specific story.
Well, in their specific instance, they're Catholic. They don't believe in abortion, in contraception, and these are requirements under Obamacare that they have to buy insurance that has those items in it. And so they're saying that our religion precludes us from engaging in that, and you're violating our religious freedom.
Yeah, this is a really gray area, and I think on a state-by-state basis we need to decide where we stand. Me personally, I still need to dig deeper into it. I personally believe that, certainly if they feel as though that there's a precedent there for it violating their religious freedom, that they do have a case, and it needs to be heard.
Well, thank you. We're out of time, but we certainly appreciate you coming by to talk with us this morning. Thank you so much.
Well, I greatly appreciate it.
If they want to know more, where can they go?
Yeah, they can visit my website, sam4roanoke.com. I greatly appreciate you all having me here today, and hopefully, I can have the support of your listeners January 7th.
Thank you.
Thank you.